Joe Doyle is back on the show to talk about the Mariners draft, what they could do at the deadline, and more. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Wednesday, July 12th, 2023. This is Trident Gonzalez for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. The MLB draft is over, so who better to talk about what the Mariners did than Joe Doyle? Let's check in with Joe. Please welcome back to the show Joe Doyle, senior analyst over at Future Stars Series and the host of Overslot, the MLB Draft podcast. Joe, it's been a really busy last few days for you, and that's probably an understatement. How are you holding up?
Doing okay. I've said this before, but my fingers are leather. I am no longer capable of giving a soft, gentle handshake, but here we are. We are past the draft.
I saw you you met some people in the Mariners community. That's pretty cool. Met some people just overall in the scouting community, all that sounded really fun. So, tell us all about that. Tell us about your experience at AllStar Week. Last time we talked a couple weeks ago, you said you were planning on going to pretty much everything. How did that go?
Yeah, I made it to everything but the Futures game. I got to celebrate my wedding anniversary on
Nice.
the same day
Congratulations.
as Thank you, thank you. So that was the one event that I didn't go to, but I just thought Seattle did a wonderful job with every event. I thought the 2024 high school All-Star game was fantastic. I thought it really represented the kids well. I thought the draft, the stage and the set and the media tent and the turn up for Seattle, the amount of people that came to just watch the draft from the Lumen Field seats and even down below in the general admission area was just awesome. I thought it was a good representation of the city. I thought the Derby was a lot of fun. I thought there was some really high highs with that, and all the players seemed to really enjoy that, except for the one kid that got hit in the face with a baseball that apparently
Yeah.
is got a pretty good shiner now. And then the All-Star
Yeah.
game last night was just a lot of fun, man. Just a culmination of so much talent. And I thought it was kind of funny that Garrett Cole was like 92 to 93, like clearly just phoning it in for the ability to start 2 or 3 days from now. But yeah, hopefully Jordan Romano's okay. I thought
Yeah.
the whole week was pretty sick, and I thought it did a big service to Seattle.
Yeah, I thought the game was really dope, especially towards the end with Julio. Like the MLB script writers, just came through, right?
Yeah, no,
Unfortunately,
they knocked it out of the park.
unfortunately, Julio wasn't able to win the game, but nice little walk, even though he took like 96 down the pipe on a 1-1 count. But whatever, we don't need to
What
talk
are you
about
gonna
that.
do?
We don't need to
What
talk
are you
about
gonna
that. Yeah. Let's talk about this draft for the Mariners. You look at the top 3 left-handed hitting high school players at 22, 29, and 30. Before I get your take on the players themselves, word on the street is both Colt Emerson and Johnny Farmello are going to sign for Overslot. Do we have any idea how much that's going to be yet?
I mean, I've got yes and no. So I think let's just put it this way. I think Colt Emerson is going to be a few 100,000 over slot, and I think Ty Pete is going to be a couple 100,000 under slot. I don't know the number on Johnny Farmello. I know that it wasn't totally ironed out when they drafted him, but seemed like it was going to be close. So I don't think, let's put it this way, neither one of Colt Emerson or Johnny Farmello should have totally hamstrung the Mariners down the draft. I shouldn't be any issues signing either one of those guys.
Maybe I missed
I
it,
want to.
but
I just want to be careful before they sign,
sure,
not to like give anything out. But yeah,
sure,
everything
for
should be
sure.
good there. hmm
Um, Again, maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear Farmello linked to the Mariners much, if at all, until only a few days before the draft. And then it seemed like everyone had mocked him to Seattle. And then lo and behold, he goes at 29. So how did that all go down?
Yeah. So a general calendar of events, the way that it works is about a week and a half, 2 weeks before the draft itself. All of the area scouts, all of the analysts will come into Seattle and they'll give presentations on all these players. That takes place, and then following that, 3 4 days later, all of the national cross checkers and we'll call them executives, come in and they give their 2 cents on all these players. And generally what ends up happening is when boards start to be kind of reworked. So while one area of the organization might not have loved Johnny, one might absolutely have fallen in love with him. And so the final product, the final board, the way it looks at the end of the day is generally not set in stone until 3, 4, 5 days before the draft. So that's when you start to see these teams connected harder and harder to specific players. It's because that's when the Scott Hunters and the Jerry DePotos and the national cross checkers really start to give their 2 cents. So I'm assuming that's what happened.
So Emerson, Farmelo, Ty Pete, of those three, who would you say has the highest ceiling, and how high is that ceiling? And who has the highest floor, and what is that floor and why?
Hmm. I think Johnny Farmelo probably has the highest ceiling just because
Mm,
it's difficult to find a guy that has double plus speed, double plus bat speed, is a left-handed hitting center field prospect. Like, I'm not comparing him to this type of a player, but like it's the skill set that got Cody Bellinger to where he was so quickly, right? I'm not saying that Johnny Farmelo is going to be Cody Bellinger. They're very, very, very different swings. But it is a pretty difficult like profile to design in a lab, for example. So I would say Farmelo's probably got the highest ceiling. In terms of what was the highest floor is definitely Colt Emerson. I mean, Colt Emerson was, outside of maybe Aiden Miller, the top high school hitter for the last 18 months. I mean, he hit
mm.
velocity, he hit spin, he hit for Team USA and the PDP and everything like that. So yeah, I think both of those guys are a really fantastic like duality of safety and ceiling. And then Ty Pete is kind of somewhere in the middle. Like, you don't know if he's going to pitch, you don't know if he's going to play shortstop. I would assume it's just shortstop, but the
Yep.
bat speed is really big. Kind of back and forth a little bit with the hit tool, but yeah, I mean, listen, I'll put it this way: if you're going to take 3 high schoolers in the top 30 picks, and you want a smattering of safety and floor and upside and up the middle, like, I think Seattle couldn't have done better.
Yeah, I really, really love what they did in the first round, especially with how the board fell, because there was some speculation. I mean, you talked about this quite a bit in your last couple mocks, that maybe one of those college bats would fall to them at 22, but then Tommy Troy goes, Matt Shaw goes right after, Cal Teal goes right after that, Enrique Bradfield a couple picks later. Like, so I felt for what ended up falling in their lap, I felt that they did a pretty good job. More from my conversation with Joe Doyle in just a moment, but first, a reminder: this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Now, I hate shopping for summer clothes. I just want to be comfortable no matter if I'm at the ballpark or back at home recording an episode of Locked On M's. Oftentimes, though, I find myself settling for clothes that feel cheap, tight, and restricting, and make me sweat in all the wrong places. Gross. I know. Thankfully, Bird Dogs has me, and therefore you, covered. Their wide selection of insanely comfortable shorts, joggers, sweatpants, polos, and more have me ready for any occasion this summer throws my way. I mean, who doesn't love stretchy fabric and built-in underwear? It's time to look good, feel good, and play good this summer. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonmlb for a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. Look, I'm using it right now. It's pretty dope. Staying hydrated while doing the show. That's birddogs.com/lockedonmlb for a free Yeti-style tumbler. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. We've got Joe Doyle here talking about the Mariners draft. Joe, I want to ask you about Terry McClure. For those that don't know, he's the Mariners area scout for Georgia and South Carolina. And if I'm not mistaken, this is his first year scouting for an MLB organization. And the Mariners took 2 of his players, including Ty Pete, with their competitive balance round A pick. Is that a rare thing for a first-time scout to have a player of his drafted that high? And if so, how rare is it?
Well, certainly not if you're scouting South Carolina and Georgia, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, true.
No, when
Very good point.
Terry's got 2 of the hotbeds, and the organization knew Terry long before he actually joined the organization. He was a coach and a leader for Team Elite. Like, he's been in the baseball community for a long time. I've known Terry since before he was in the organization, and he's always treated me well. So, do I think it's rare? Well, I put it this way: it's rare that a team has 4 picks in the top 60, right? So that
Mm,
inherently makes the chances of something like that happening higher than most. But to answer your question, I really just think drafting depends on what area, what region you have. Like if you have the Carolinas, you're gonna get a ton of guys drafted. If you have Florida, if you have Georgia, Texas, like you're gonna have a lot of guys drafted. Like I look at there's a guy up here in the Pacific Northwest, Tyler Warmoth, who handles Washington and Oregon and I think Northern California and Idaho. Like there's just not that much talent coming out of that region on a year in and year out basis. So the chances of him ever getting a player drafted are lower than like Georgia or South Carolina. So no,
Right.
Terry's a great guy. He's a great good talent evaluator, a good leader, a good coach, and congrats to him for landing such a haul. And he's got to be pretty proud of his efforts this past spring.
So the other draftee of McClure's was sixth rounder Brody Hopkins, right-handed pitcher out of Winthrop. And like Pete, he's a ridiculous athlete, like an absolute freak. You
Yeah.
had him ranked, I believe, 107 on your board. They get him at 187. What do you think about that pick?
I always tend to skew towards athletes. I think athletes are a moldable trait that you can't get in some other players. Like, for example, Tyler Locklear last year wasn't ranked wherever we picked him, wherever Seattle picked him, 64, something like that.
Mhm.
I had him in the 90s. Brody Hopkins to me is a guy that is a incredible mover on the mound. He needs to learn to repeat his delivery. He needs to learn to repeat his arm slot, and he just needs to learn to command the baseball. Like I think the strike throwing, I liken it to what Matt Brash was in 2022. Like he's an incredibly quick mover on the mound, gets down the mound fast, fast arm, big stuff. Needs to learn how to command this stuff. And so he'll probably take the 2021 Matt Brash route where he starts at least in 2024, and he may
Mhm.
ultimately get pushed into the bullpen. But I look at Brody Hopkins and the way that he moves and how green he is and his two pitch mix. And I see a guy that if he's in the bullpen will be 98 to 101 with a slider that's like 88 to 90 on a night in and night out basis. I don't know if it works as a starting pitcher. I think he's athletic enough to do it, but he's so green that it's too early to kind of project that. So I think at worst, and this is just my evaluation, I think Brody Hopkins is the high leverage late inning reliever who could be in
Couple,
Seattle in 2024. I wouldn't shock me at all.
couple rounds before Hopkins, the Mariners took another prep bat in Aiden Smith. What do you think about the player, and how much do you think it's going to cost Seattle to pry him from Mississippi State?
I'm not even. I don't have any information on how much it's going to cost, but I
Okay.
actually didn't get my first look at Aiden until the combine. That was the first time that I
Okay.
had seen him. It was the first time that I wrote him up. Um, you know, great body. I think he's going to hit for quite a bit more power than he is going to actually hit. Um, there's bat speed there. There's some tinkering that I think that needs to be done with his swing. There's a little bit of a bar that comes through and it makes for inconsistent barrels, if that makes sense. So I think they'll try to clean that up, but what a good frame. Projectable power. I think he's got a shot to stay in center field, but I would imagine just looking at that kid that he's going to add 15 pounds in like overnight. So he probably plays right field, but yeah, definitely he has the looks of an impact bat, a corner guy, just some small consistency and mechanical things that I'd like to see them change. But he was one of the louder performers, I think, at the combine.
In the third round, the Mariners took right-handed pitcher Teddy McGraw out of Wake Forest, a guy who had first-round buzz entering the
Mhm.
year, but underwent a procedure on his elbow. It's been widely reported he's had two Tommy John surgeries since his senior year in high school, but I've heard the most recent operation wasn't technically Tommy John. Are you able to provide some clarity on that? And when do you think we could see him on the mound?
Yeah, it's a UCL brace, which is pretty similar, frankly, to Tommy John. It's just not a total reconstruction. It's generally an 8-month recovery, and then you got to kind of take it slow. So I mean, I think there's a chance that he pitches in 2024 right out of the gates, but with his injury history and with his pure stuff, Seattle might try and work with his delivery a little bit, change some things about him before they send him out into Modesto or anything like that. He's going to have to get ramped up too. I mean, we're not talking about a guy that's throwing a whole lot of innings. So, but no, I mean, I talked with some scouts in January and February, and this guy was, up to 99. He was sitting 94, 95, 96. Slider peaked at 91. Like it's just a hellish slider. So I would obviously give this kid the chance to start. He's a really good kid. I interviewed him over at Prospects Live on YouTube if you want to, take 15 or 16 minutes of that interview in. But Teddy's a good kid. He's a pitch design freak. He's all about that sort of thing. So I would expect to see him in 2024. I don't know when. But yeah, to your point, I had Teddy a top 25 or top 30 prospect in my top 300 board, I think, when that came out in February. So the arm talent is undeniable. The durability is the question.
More from my conversation with Joe Doyle in just a moment. But first, a reminder this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. Now, getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. Therapy is all about deepening your self awareness and understanding because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk through things. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self discovery from wherever you are. Therapy can be helpful for learning positive coping skills, how to set boundaries. It can empower you to be the best version of yourself. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. And if you don't feel that your match is suitable for you, no worries. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnMLB today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnMLB. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen. I'm here with Joe Doyle of Future Stars Series talking about the Mariners draft. Joe, the Mariners clearly had a type heading towards the end of day 2 and into day 3. Quite a few college righties with either a sinker or a high spin rate slider or both. Anyone from that group stand out to you?
They're all the same. They are all the same.
we talked about that yesterday.
Honestly,
they're all
man,
so similar.
They are so similar. There is a lot of Kendall Gravemans, both in the delivery and the execution, and I think Seattle's just trying to kind of corner the leverageable reliever market, which is a good thing to do. I mean, when you think about it, you can buy starting pitching, and it's a good investment. But you look at kind of the investments of like a Juan Nicasio and trying to avoid something like that, or a Joaquin Benoit, like spending that money trying to avoid that by just having endless supplies of relievers. I do want to talk to Scott and Jerry, and I'm sure I'll do this over the next month or so. We'll see when it happens. I want to talk to them about whether or not they see a shift in the meta in Major League Baseball, because for the last, what would you say, 5 years, it's been carry through the zone out of a low slot and the sweeper. Well, this kind of, like you said, pointed to more like backdoor sinkers, front door sinkers, sliders, like doing that two-seam tunnel that crosses like that.
Right.
So I'll be interested to see exactly why they went so hard into that market. They drafted like 5 of them. I'll say we didn't talk a whole lot about Ernie Day from Campbell. Ernie Day's a good arm. Ernie Day is pretty nasty, and he's probably the most funky of the group. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of high-octane arms with unique traits, and I think I would be stunned, frankly, if we don't see 1 or 2 of them on top prospect boards or in Seattle by April 2025. They're pretty complete players. I do think some of them will start. Like, I think Brody Hopkins is going to get a chance to start. I would expect Ty Cummings to get a chance to start, although he has been primarily a reliever. We'll see. I'll be interested to see exactly how they deploy each one of them, because almost all of them are probably relievers.
Right. It's really interesting because we've also not only seen the Mariners target this prototype in the draft, but also, at the major league level, Justin Topa, obviously. Like that's the big one. I mean, yesterday on the show, we literally said all these guys are Justin Topa, or Kendall Graveman is another great one, right? Like, yeah. So, definitely something to talk to Jerry and Scott there about. I want to talk a little bit about, the current Mariners team and the upcoming deadline, but before we do that, is there anyone I haven't asked you about from the Mariners class that you think we should be paying more attention to?
I caught your guys' podcast. I don't know when this will come out, maybe yesterday. And Jared Sunstrom was a guy that you didn't know much about. And I'll tell you,
Yeah.
I watched Sunstrom. I didn't write him up because he was the, hulking corner outfield with huge strikeouts, 22 years old. I didn't write him up because I was like, if this guy goes, he goes. It's probably a day 3 guy. Some really interesting things about Sunstrom that I'll kind of bring to your show. One of very, very, very few college hitters in college baseball this year that did not swing and miss at a single 92-mile-an-hour fastball or faster. So he's going to hit fastballs. He has got some work to do on the breaking ball.
Okay.
We'll put it that way. But
Sure.
yeah, massive exit velos. Definitely kind of similar to what Spencer Packard was in terms of the model that they targeted him out of. But yeah, just a hulking slugger. So he'll be interesting to watch. He's going to hit some dingers.
A few months ago when I had you on the show, we talked about, good names in the draft. We obviously talked a lot about Gino Groover, who I'm so disappointed is not a Mariner. But hey, shout out to the Diamondbacks, by the way. Great draft by the Diamondbacks. Really love their draft.
Oh, yeah.
Really love what they did. Actually, on that note, real quick, what are your top 5 drafts? From
oh man,
draft?
I haven't even gotten to that yet. I will say Arizona, I thought knocked it out of the park. I regret to inform you that the Houston Astros, I thought crushed this draft. Baltimore had a very, very good draft. I think I really liked Seattle's draft because they clearly went in with a plan and a model, and they followed that deep into the draft. So they did really nice. Cincinnati, I thought, did very, very well. I'll be interested to see what comes out of the Rhett Lauder situation because it does sound like there's an underslot situation there at number 7. But what they were able to move around in terms of money and get just dudes. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds. Cincinnati was really, really good as well. So honestly, there weren't too many teams that I looked at their draft and said, I don't really know what you were doing here. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I thought everyone tackled this pretty well.
So again, on the note about names, there's quite a few names here with the Mariners. Obviously, Shrek, got Ryan Hawks. Some good names here. What's your favorite from this Mariners class? What's the best name?
Oh, the best name. I'm gonna go. I don't even know who this guy is, so I don't know who Charlie Pagliarini is, but I hope he's really good. It's a sick name. I have no idea who Charlie Pagliarini is. Maybe it's the surprise element that has me excited about it.
You didn't know about Braylon Garcia as well, right? The lefty out of Texas A&M. How did you miss an SEC pitcher from Texas A&M?
I don't know. He was a reliever. I don't know how I missed a lefty that's touched that I saw in the Slack the other day were pretty spot on. No, I don't know. Sometimes it's easy to overlook. When I'm sorting through stats and pitch data and all this junk, sometimes it's easy to sort by the amount of pitches a guy has thrown because generally the top prospects are the ones that have thrown quite a few innings. I guess I didn't sort by max velocity enough because Brandon Garcia has pretty nasty stuff. I'll own that.
So before we get into what the Mariners could do at the deadline, the Astros are really banged up right now. The Rangers are really struggling. What do you think those two teams are going to wind up doing at the deadline?
Well, the Astros have to add a pitcher. Just as a guy that can eat innings, I think Houston is in a weird spot right now. Altuve's busted up. Jordan sounds like he's coming back, and whenever he comes back, I mean, when is the last time that guy came back from an injury and missed a beat? Like they're going to be just fine when Jordan comes back. Yeah. So I think with Houston, they need pitching. They need to be able to, rectify some of these bottom of the rotation woes that they've got so many rookies throwing for the Houston Astros right now. And then the Texas Rangers, I think they're going to run away with this thing. That offense has not slowed down. I know that they've slowed down as a team a little bit, but they're still one of the best offenses in baseball. I mean, they had 6 starters or whatever in the All-Star game. It's too much talent for them to think that they would slow down for a considerable amount of time. I would anticipate that they're going to go pretty aggressive into the bullpen market. So I think if you're Seattle, you try to pass the Astros. I think the Angels are obviously drowning right now, but you try to pass the Astros and see if you can't make a run here toward the end.
So the Mariners are playing their best ball right now. They're 4 back of the third wild card. They're 6 back of the division. And, I mentioned that the Rangers are kind of falling back to the pack as of now. We'll see
Mhm.
if that continues. It obviously depends on how well the Mariners come out of the All-Star break, but how aggressive do you foresee them being on the trade market if they continue to play like this? And who are some names or teams you think are a good fit?
I personally think Seattle's trade approach hasn't changed from day one. Like, yeah, so if they were 15 games over 500 right now, you probably would see more, 3-month rentals. But I think their
Mhm.
plan has always been to go and Jerry has said as much, go after multi-year guys. The guy that stands out for me, I don't know what the Red Sox are going to do, but this team seems like it would really do well with a Justin Turner. I don't know what the no trade clause looks like.
Mhm.
I don't know the specifics there, but Justin Turner added to this lineup for a couple of pitchers. I think he's controlled through 2024. So you throw a couple of pitchers to Boston. I think that would be a really good deal for Seattle to try and tackle. But besides that, it's difficult to find a lot of matches, Ty. And I think you know that. Like, there's just not a
Yeah.
whole lot of teams that are out of it right now. And because
Yeah.
of that, you're kind of handcuffed a little bit. So I would expect we're going to see more deals in 2023 that are like considerable pieces for considerable pieces across the league. Like the
Mhm.
prospects, like the strictly 3 or 4 prospects for a dude type of a move. There's just too many teams that are competing these days. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of teams. So
Right. So it's, to me, it's either going to be that or it's going to be a lot more teams than we've seen in the past just standing pat, doing the
yep,
bare minimum essentially.
price
It's
tags are
it's
going to be a
really
lot higher.
Yeah, it's really hard because like right now I look at the standings and I go, there's 5 teams that are clear sellers, 6 teams, and then
Yeah.
I mean, like the teams that are just that don't have great records right now, they're not really built to just sell. They're built more so to retool this offseason and go after it again next year. So it's really, really complicated. It's a mess. We've heard some rumors. It's mostly John Morosi pushing this that the Mariners and the Cardinals could line up in a trade. Pitcher from Seattle for a bat from St. Louis. I don't know if you've listened to the show to the point where you've heard us talk about how we don't feel that that's beneficial to the Mariners in the short term or the long term, really,
Mhm.
because it's just such a strength of theirs. And they well, and also after Emerson Hancock, I mean, who do they have in the in the farm right now? I mean, Michael Morales,
Yeah.
maybe,
Aaron
but
Bowen, I
that's
mean, for trade chips, yeah.
yeah. So is there a bat out there that you would consider trading a Brian Wu for?
So here's my issue with the Brian Wu ideas.
Yeah.
I think if you're trading Brian Wu, you're trading him to another contender, right?
Yeah.
The other 5 teams that are out of it, they could use Brian Wu, but Brian Wu doesn't have too many innings left in him this year. Like, I can't
Yeah.
imagine he's going to pitch far outside of the month of July. So, you
Yeah, like,
know,
for example, the Orioles, like, I hear the Orioles all the time with Brian Wu, and
yep,
I'm like, "That doesn't make any sense," for that
exactly.
reason that you
So
just brought up.
I've talked about like specifically this winter, it makes more sense. But like Brian Wu for Jordan Westberg makes a lot of sense. I
Mhm.
think you'd probably need more than Jordan Westberg to get rid of Brian Wu. Maybe Joey Ortiz is thrown in, or these may sound outlandish to Orioles fans, and that's fine. They're not serious trades, but in terms of like what one team needs and what the other team needs and what the other team is short on, like a Jordan Westberg for Brian Wu trade makes sense, or maybe a Kobe Mayo for Brian Wu, or like, Walter Ford and another arm. Like, I think the Orioles really match up well with the Seattle Mariners. But like you said, I don't think any of those trades make any sense for either team in July. I think the Cardinals the same way. Tommy Edman to Seattle makes a ton of sense. I don't know what we could give to the Cardinals that, maybe they'd be okay with taking on Brian Wu and not pitching him for the rest of the year. I'm not sure, but
Mhm.
that doesn't really benefit Seattle either because then they're out of arms. Tommy Malone is suddenly making 8 starts down the stretch. So I don't think Nolan Gorman makes a lot of sense for the Mariners. I don't think Lars Nootbaar. I don't think Seattle could put together a package that makes sense there. But those
Mhm.
are the 2 teams that it does line up well, like Baltimore and St. Louis. But I would expect it more this winter.
Right. Same, same. Well, Joe, thank you so much for hopping on again. Where can our
Mhm.
listeners find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Joe Doyle MILB. You can find me at patreon.com/overslot, and you can find all my draft coverage over at futurestarsseries.com.
Thanks, Joe. Get some rest.
Appreciate it, man.
That's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. I've been your host, Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You follow me at Dane Gonzalez, it's DANEGNZLZ, and Colby. That's my co-host over at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok as well over at Locked On Mariners. That's one word, Locked On Mariners. Same at for our new Threads account as well. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.